Lieutenant Governor McNally, Speaker Cassida, Speaker Pro Tem Hale and Speaker Pro Tem Dunn, members of the 111th General Assembly, justices, constitutional officers, friends, family, guests, and fellow Tennesseans. Tennessee's voters and its Constitution have given me the responsibility of delivering this address, evaluating where we are as a state, and recommending action to make us even better. I am truly grateful for this opportunity to serve, and it's my high honor to be here tonight. There's a scripture that encourages us to consider others as more important than ourselves. And before I begin tonight, I want to acknowledge the woman in my life who embodies that the most. My wife and the First Lady of Tennessee, Maria. You and I have a First Lady who is deeply committed to serving this state purposefully, and she challenges me every day to likewise govern with purpose. Thank you, Maria. I love you. And let me say welcome to our cabinet and to our staff. You're doing a remarkable job, and you make us all very proud. The year that my oldest daughter turned 16, Jessica, she and I took a father-daughter trip for her birthday. We had both been through some very challenging and traumatic personal experiences, and we decided to do something that would be overcoming. So we traveled to the Grand Teton National Park, and we decided to climb one of the tallest mountains in the country. It's a difficult and a technical climb, and we had to train for months, both physically and mentally. The apex of our trip would take us to 14,000 feet above sea level. And our first day, we were to hike to 11,000 feet to spend the night. And as we approached the base camp, our guide, probably sensing my nervousness, he pulled me aside and he said something very important. He said, "You need to make a decision that you're going to make this climb before you get to the base camp. Because when you get there, you're going to look up at the Grand Teton, and it'll look like a massive granite spire that sticks straight up higher than you ever imagined, and you'll feel very intimidated. And if you have even the tiniest doubt in your mind that you can do it as you're hiking up there, then once you stand at the base camp tonight and look up, you'll be convinced that you can't possibly climb it." So he told me that I needed to decide right then and there whether I was going to finish that climb. I did decide, and we did finish. And let me tell you, it's like everything that's difficult. The view from the top was well worth the climb. As a state, our challenges, too, are difficult, and the climb will require great effort. But Tennessee is a remarkable place with remarkable people. Now, I think we can all agree that while very important things happen in the halls of government, it's actually what happens outside of this place that makes Tennessee truly great. And nearly every Friday since we took office, Maria and I have gone out of this building to meet people in their communities to learn about what really makes our state work. We met with soybean farmers in Lauderdale County who navigate the flooding Mississippi water to pull in a harvest and carry on our proud agricultural tradition. We met a third grade teacher in North Nashville who works overtime to ensure that her kids are reading at grade level and that they continue to lead the nation in achievement. We met a small business owner in Jamestown who employs neighbors and keeps the backbone of the Tennessee economy running strong. And so as a lifelong Tennessean myself, when I reflect on our state and I see her people, I'm filled with pride. So to our elected leaders in this room and the many Tennesseans watching from their homes, I am proud to report, after seeing with my own eyes, the state of our state is hopeful and prosperous and strong. God has truly blessed us. Our economy is growing, our schools are improving, our natural resources are abundant and beautiful. Indeed, we're the envy of many states. But while our prosperity should be celebrated, it should not be taken for granted, for it was not granted to us. Our prosperity has been hard-won. From the first settlers of the 1790s to the leaders of the past and the present, many have contributed to the success that we now enjoy. Our military veterans, living and those remembered, deserve the most honored place among those that we thank for where we are today. We recognize the service of our heroes, and I'd like to talk for just a minute about one family in particular who has embodied that service and that sacrifice. U.S. Navy Lieutenant Richard C. Tito Lanham, got to get that right, of Union City, was reported missing as of March 1st, 1968, during the Vietnam War. The Obion County native was assigned to Attack Squadron 35 aboard the USS Enterprise aircraft carrier and was on an A-6A aircraft on a night mission over North Vietnam. Like many, Tito did not come back. Lanham and the pilot were declared missing after a search and rescue mission failed to locate their plane. He was 27 years old. In 2017, the Vietnamese excavated a crash site on Tre Ban Island, and they were able ultimately to identify Lanham last September. And this past weekend, our state had a memorial service for him. After more than 50 years, Lieutenant Lanham's final resting place is home on Tennessee soil, where he belongs. Please join me in pausing to remember Lieutenant Lanham and the sacrifice that Tito and so many others have made for our country with a moment of silence. And now please join me in recognizing the family of Lieutenant Tito Lanham, who has come from across Tennessee to be with us. Thank you for all your sacrifices and for being here tonight. Indeed, this is a remarkable state with remarkable people, but past success should not be taken for granted and future success should not be assumed. We can be glad for the things that have been done that have brought us to this point, but we must also recognize that new accomplishments will be required from the leaders of today if we're to reach our full potential tomorrow. Maybe the key question before us is whether we will stay here and enjoy the view from this far up the mountain, or we will push ahead to new heights and new prosperity. My encouragement to you, to all of us, is that we press ahead. A stronger education system, a better prepared workforce, a system of justice that lives up to its name, and safer neighborhoods all across our state. These and more goals are within our reach if we unite behind a common vision. In addition to delivering this address, I also have the task of proposing to you a state budget. By God's favor, our state is in a strong financial position, and I believe that my proposed budget reflects that. Managing a budget is one of the most important jobs that government has, and proposing a fiscally responsible budget is one of the most important jobs that I have as governor. And as a conservative businessman, I know that a good budget needs to pay for what we need, take on zero long-term debt, and most importantly, save for a rainy day. As our state continues to grow, we're committed to remaining among one of the most fiscally sound and best managed states in America. We live in prosperous days, but it's precisely during these times when we must build up our storehouses for when times may not be as good. And for that reason, I'm particularly proud of this. In my budget, we're making the largest single contribution to our rainy day fund in the state's history. When this budget is implemented, our rainy day fund will be $1.1 billion, the largest it's ever been in real dollars. This budget is fiscally conservative, and it stays within the Copeland cap, which is, as you in this room know, is in our state's Constitution as a guardrail against out-of-control government spending. I have said many times that Tennessee can and should lead the nation, and this budget will help us do that. In particular, there are 4 things in my budget and legislative agenda that I believe we must do if the goal to lead the nation is to become a reality. First, Tennessee must deliver a world-class education, and that education must be aligned with the needs of the job creators of today and of the future. To accomplish that, our students need more guidance, our teachers and our principals need more support, and our parents need more choices. I've spoken often about the 4 out of 10 students who will not attend college in this state. For them, we must vastly strengthen our vocational and technical and agricultural educational offerings to make sure that they're career ready. After 35 years in the private sector, I know the job market can change quickly, and education must stay in sync with industry. When companies like Google and Apple and IBM no longer require a college degree for many high-skilled jobs, we know that we need to think differently about how we approach preparing our kids for success. Elementary and middle schools need to begin skills training earlier, and from top to bottom, high school needs to look a lot different. In that spirit, I'm proposing the Governor's Investment in Vocational Education, the GIVE Act. The GIVE Act is a $25 million investment to increase the number of young people earning an industry certification and entering a career within 1 year of high school. Another one of our goals is to put Tennessee in the top half of states for technology sector job creation by 2022. And to that end, I announced the Future Workforce Initiative, a $4 million effort to increase science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM training in our K-12 schools. The Future Workforce Initiative will add 100 new CTE programs, grow the number of teachers qualified to teach work-based learning and computer science classes, and it will expand access to AP courses and early post-secondary options for high schoolers. We're also investing in agriculture education by allocating new recurring funding for both 4-H and FFA youth programs. These programs and other educational programs like them are so important, and it takes the work of dedicated teachers and principals to make sure that our students are being well prepared. One such teacher is Dan Smith from Dyer County. And he's an example of the thousands of dedicated teachers that we're fortunate to have in this state. Dan's a horticultural and agriculture teacher at Dyer County High School. He's a former Agriculture Teacher of the Year because of his exemplary work with students. He's coordinated massive plant sales, integrated master gardeners, and landscaped his entire school. And that is just the beginning. He's a pillar in his community. He embodies the term agricultural education. He's with us here today, and I want you to join me representing teachers all across this state and thanking him for his years of dedicated work to improve the lives of the students of Tennessee. Thank you, Dan. Please stand. Many students will go to college, and for that group, we want to provide world-class higher education options across our state. We must continue to invest in our outcomes-based and outcomes-focused approach to funding higher education, which is why we have set aside $34 million new dollars in this budget to fully fund our higher education institutions. We will also invest more than $12 million in financial aid to add nearly 7,000 students in need to those that we help attain college or obtain a certificate here in Tennessee. We're also adding resources to help prepare disadvantaged students for college so they can best take advantage of the opportunities they earn. We're making CTE a major priority, but we also want to do other things well. I fundamentally believe that every child ought to have access to a great traditional public school. And so, even as we consider expanding options in this state, we must redouble our efforts to make sure that public schools in Tennessee are well-resourced and that Tennessee teachers and principals are the best and most celebrated in the business. First and foremost, we are fully funding the basic education program and we're recommending $71 million for a well-deserved 2.5% pay raise for teachers. Additionally, to support educators and school leaders, we're proposing investments in the professional development of rural principals and expansion of the Rural Principal Network. In response to the increasing needs of our lowest performing 5% of schools, we're investing $5 million into improving student and teacher support in our priority schools. Across our state, we have leaders and qualified educators who are making the sacrifice to serve on local school boards and to bring their ideas to the table. Later this month, I'll send a letter to every school board member and superintendent in this state, seeking their input on what is working and what should still be done to make Tennessee the home of the best public schools in America. To those of you listening today, please know that I look forward to personally reading your individual responses. Now, in my budget, I propose a 3-year pilot program to provide critical student support services to high school students in our ever-important rural distressed 15 counties. These funds will be matched by private donations and will allow us to provide meaningful support while also measuring the positive effects of this pilot program for rural Tennessee. I have often said that education is about more than a test score. But test scores can provide valuable data to both teachers and students when used properly. Later this month, tens of thousands of students will be completing their end-of-course testing to help ensure that they're receiving the highest quality education that they deserve. Now, there's been a lot of frustration around the administration of this test in this state for the last couple of years, and I share that frustration. And my Commissioner of Education is working tirelessly to prepare for this year's test to minimize challenges, but more importantly, working tirelessly to finalize the procurement process for selecting a new test vendor for next year and beyond. So while the execution must get better, we must remain committed to the notion that you can't improve what you don't measure. Going forward, our focus will be on executing a testing regimen that's trustworthy, that's helpful, and that is on time. Now, whatever else happens in the classroom, the safety of our students and of our teachers is paramount for my administration and for all of our elected leaders. And for that reason, I'm asking the legislature to join with me to fund an additional $30 million investment in our school safety fund and to prioritize the districts with schools who currently have no school resource officers on duty. Together, we can make sure that every school is a safer place for our children. In my inaugural address, I said that Tennesseans would have to be bold and courageous and strong in the face of our greatest challenges. And one of those challenges is closing the gap between the quality of education offered to students regardless of their zip code. Tennessee has led the nation with important K-12 education reforms over the last decade, and we've seen the payoff. Our student outcomes have been among the fastest improving in the nation. But sustained improvement requires constant innovation, and we must keep looking for the next game changer. Parents need more choices with respect to the education of their children, and those options should be well-funded and highly accountable. Students have different needs and abilities, and our education system should reflect that diversity as best as possible. I believe highly accountable public charter schools are a great model for expanding choice without sacrificing quality, and I have seen firsthand how they can dramatically impact the life and trajectory of a student. In my budget, we're doubling the amount of public charter school facility funding, and I will support legislation this year that makes it easier to open good charter schools and easier to close bad ones. But we should do even more. Nearly 1 in 3 students born into poverty does not finish high school in Tennessee. And a child that doesn't finish high school is more likely to stay in poverty. Low-income students deserve the same opportunities as every other kid in this state, and we will need a bold plan that will help level the playing field. We need to challenge the status quo and increase competition and not slow down until every student in Tennessee has access to a great education. And we're not going to get big results in our struggling schools by nibbling around the edges. That is why we need education savings accounts in Tennessee this year. ESAs ESAs will enable low-income students from the most underperforming schools to attend an independent school of their choice at no cost to their family. Now, the greatest concern about programs like this is that it will take money away from public schools, but my ESA plan will invest at least $25 million new dollars in public schools in the first year to fill the gap when a student transfers to another school. My ESA plan will strengthen public schools and provide choices for parents at the same time, creating competition will provide a new incentive for schools to improve and provide new opportunities for thousands of students. Members of the legislature, now is the time. Let's make this the year that every student in Tennessee has a chance at a great education, no matter where they live. Another important issue in education is curriculum. We should continue to root out the influence of Common Core everywhere we find it in this state. But there is another issue that we should be mindful of as well. During the past 2 years of this campaign, on the campaign trail, I was constantly asked about civics and character education. Now, at face value, this seems like a small issue, but however, in the last year, it was reported that young people between the ages of 18 and 29 in this country have a more favorable view of socialism than capitalism. And last week I read a story that said 49 out of 50 states, in 49 of 50 states, a majority of residents would fail a U.S. citizenship test. Now, I can't help but think those two statistics are related. President Reagan said that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. This demands answering an obvious question. How will our children know of our cherished American values if we don't teach them? We all desire a more perfect union, but we cannot expect future generations to build upon the incredible progress our country has made if we fail to teach them the history and values that made it possible. So let me say this. Whatever may be going on in other states, or even going on in our nation's capital, in this state, our children will be taught civics education and character formation. They'll be taught civics education, character formation, and unapologetic American exceptionalism. We're beginning that effort by creating the Governor's Civics Instructional Seal, which will recognize schools that excel at teaching civics education. Now, I said there were 4 things that we must do to lead the nation. First, we build a better education system. The other 3 are not going to be quite this long. Second, we must build a criminal justice system that is tough and smart and, above all, just. For decades, this country has been too willing to fight crime on the surface alone, lock them up and throw away the key. Now, in more ways than one, we are paying the price for that. Tennessee is currently incarcerating more people for longer than we ever have. And the population in our county jails is growing daily. In fact, at the bottom of this hill begins the most incarcerated zip code in America. Incarceration has a generational impact too. Children with an incarcerated parent are at a greater risk of being incarcerated themselves. Besides the human cost, there's actual cost. Incarcerating an adult in Tennessee costs $28,000 a year of taxpayer money. And incarcerating a juvenile can cost many times more than that. And for all the trouble and cost, what are our criminal justice outcomes? Violent crime is up. Recidivism is high. Jails are full and struggling to make ends meet. Let me be clear. The punishment for violent crime must be swift and severe. But we also must get better at helping those who will be released prepare to re-enter society and not re-enter prison. It's past time that our state's elected leaders speak with one voice on this important issue. When it comes to reforming our state's justice system, the cost of doing nothing isn't zero. Crime victims pay the price, families pay the price, taxpayers pay the price. In my proposal to the legislature this year, I'm recommending a series of smart reforms that will make a big difference. One area of reform is my administration will address our use of community supervision for low-risk offenders. Community supervision allows us to provide the corrections oversight necessary to hold someone accountable for their crime without incurring the economic and social costs of incarceration. It costs 20 times more to incarcerate someone than to put them under community supervision, and the latter actually leads to better outcomes. One of the first things we'll do is add funds to the Electronic Monitoring Indigency Fund to add the use of GPS monitoring so that low-risk, nonviolent offenders can keep their jobs and provide for their families instead of spending unnecessary time in jail. Of those who are incarcerated, 95% are not serving a life sentence, and they will eventually come out. And we need to be sure that they are prepared for that. Why? Because every successful reentry means one less crime and one less victim. My commitment to having fewer crimes in this state is reflected in a proposed expansion of education and reentry counseling opportunities in our prisons. Educational attainment for incarcerated people can reduce their risk of recidivism by 43%. Another important part of successful reentry is stable employment. For that reason, we've introduced a bill eliminating the expungement fees for those already eligible under the law to alleviate the cost and the burden of getting back on their feet. We must take bold steps to stop the scourge of drugs illegally trafficked into our state. I pledge to make Tennessee a state that drug traffickers fear, and I will make sure that our prosecutors and our law enforcement have the tools that they need to make that a reality. We're increasing the penalties on dangerous drugs like fentanyl, and we're making it clear that we will have no leniency on high-level drug dealers who target the residents of our state. And we need more than just strong laws to keep our communities safe. We also need strong law enforcement. It's no secret that Tennessee lags other states in law enforcement and corrections pay, which impacts our hiring and our retention rates. We're increasing investments in correctional officer pay and training opportunities. And this budget calls for new investments in our law enforcement capacity, improving the in-service training pay supplement, providing new funding to support the increased demands of our drug overdose and violent crime task force. And furthermore, tomorrow morning I will sign an executive order creating a task force to address the growing fiscal and social costs of incarceration. I appreciate the focus placed on the issues by our members of the legislature and by the Supreme Court in recent years, and it's time to move even more forward in a comprehensive way. This task force will be led by Judge Brandon Gibson in my office and will include crime victims and their families, members of the General Assembly, state agencies, law enforcement, community and faith-based organizations, and yes, even former inmates. Fundamentally, this task force will recommend legislative and budgetary changes that will help reduce recidivism and make our communities safer and save tax dollars. I know we can do things differently because I've been involved with groups who have made a difference. Nonprofits like Men of Valor in Nashville are helping those who enter prison be better prepared to re-enter society. The recidivism rate of Men of Valor's program graduates is less than 1/3 of the state's average. One person who benefited from this group is a man named Marcus Martin. Marcus was incarcerated for 5 years, and by his own admission, he was on a quick path back to prison until he got involved with Men of Valor. Now, on the outside for 16 years, Marcus is a full-time prison minister, helping and making a huge impact on those still on the inside. Marcus Martin is with us here tonight, and I would love for us to recognize him. Marcus, please stand. Marcus, thank you for what you're doing. My fellow Tennesseans, this is a story of redemption. It's a story of Tennesseans helping other Tennesseans. And it's also a story of fiscal responsibility and common sense. We need more of these stories, and when we get them, it won't be surprising to see that our crime rate and our recidivism rates start going down. And my administration will do more than talk about how important these issues are. We intend to be national innovators and leaders in showing how people throughout our state, the volunteer state, are willing to partner together to serve one another. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that we're launching the Volunteer Mentorship Initiative to equip Tennesseans all across our state to mentor fellow Tennesseans who are currently in prison. And I'm signing up tonight as the first volunteer. This initiative This initiative will begin by working with Tennessee-based nonprofits to pair degree-seeking inmates with mentors on the outside as they seek better opportunities for themselves during their time in prison and their first days back into their communities. I'm pleased to announce that Senator Mike Bell and Representative Michael Curcio have graciously agreed to be the honorary co-chairs of the Volunteer Mentorship Initiative. And I'm even more proud that every member of my senior staff has enthusiastically agreed to join this program as our first batch of mentors. Tonight, I'm asking members of our General Assembly and every Tennessean who desires to prayerfully consider volunteering to join this effort. As our state has shown, we can change the course of history and the destiny of people when we step up, volunteer, and serve one another. The challenge ahead of us is great, but the urgency of the situation is greater. And I know that we will rise to meet the challenge. For this issue, the admonition to we public servants is clear. Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. First, education. Second, justice. And third, every Tennessean should have access to high-quality health care that they can afford. This is an ambitious goal that no state has accomplished, and Tennessee will not accomplish it overnight. We will work with patients, providers, and payers to establish Tennessee as a world-class healthcare market for our people, using transparency and competition. To begin this process, I've asked our Finance and Administration Commissioner, Stuart McWhorter, to chair a healthcare modernization task force that will work closely with the private sector stakeholders, policymakers, and communities across the state to develop a list of reforms and critical investments. In the short term, there are several things that we can do to move Tennessee toward having better health outcomes so that more uninsured Tennesseans have access to quality primary and preventative care services. We're providing additional funding to our health care safety net, which supports community and faith-based care centers serving those who do not have health insurance coverage. And we will continue to work with the General Assembly and with Washington to look for waiver opportunities that help us increase insurance coverage without big government strings attached. We'll also be exploring ways to build off the important efforts of the Trump administration to promote price transparency. Another way to lower healthcare costs is to combat Medicaid fraud. Tackling fraud in Medicaid is particularly important as we work to prevent the fraudulent distribution of opioid medications. To support that effort, we're creating 24 new positions in the state's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. Together, these efforts will place downward pressure on the cost of coverage. And I'm also committed to working with our rural communities to ensure that they have quality health care that meets their current and future needs. Despite the closure of rural hospitals across this state and country, there are many opportunities to transform care in these communities through smart reforms, increased innovation, and a new business model. Addressing these challenges requires a long-term approach, and we've already taken steps that will deliver real progress this year. For one, I'm proposing $20 million to boost broadband accessibility, which will make technology like telemedicine more accessible and practical. We're increasing by as much as $8.6 million funding for graduate medical education at Tennessee's medical schools and critical incentive programs that will provide financial support to resident physicians who commit to living and working in rural communities. By increasing the supply of care that reflects the needs of rural communities, we'll be driving down the overall cost of care. Our focus on economic development and vocational education will also drive better health outcomes as individuals are increasingly able to get higher paying jobs that provide greater stability and access to coverage. And too often the conversation around healthcare focuses exclusively on physical health. Physical well-being is important, but a national conversation around mental and behavioral health is long overdue. Nearly 300,000 Tennesseans are facing serious mental health challenges, and far too many are slipping through the cracks. I made a vow on the campaign trail to strengthen the mental health safety net, and I intend to do just that. In this budget, I'm recommending an increase of $11 million in recurring funds to our behavioral health safety net and our regional mental health institutes. These investments will help us serve thousands more of our most vulnerable Tennesseans, most of which do not currently have health insurance. Tennessee's suicide rate is 20% higher than the national average. And for that reason, I'm proposing a $1.1 million investment that will expand the state's partnership with the Tennessee Suicide Prevention Network to establish a new regional outreach model and increase the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services effect. To truly be champions of mental and behavioral health, we must put everything we have behind defeating the opioid crisis in Tennessee once and for all. We must continue to make progress in preventing addiction, and I'll defend the smart limits on prescriptions passed by this legislature. In this budget, we'll also work to address the other victims of the opioid crisis, the dependent children of those addicted. We recommend expanding our investment in Safe Baby Courts initiative to support vulnerable infants and we are including $5 million in new funding to address a rising caseload in our Department of Children's Services. Also, as we begin to see an increasing rise of students entering kindergarten facing challenges from prenatal drug use, I recommend that we invest an additional $6 million in our early intervention services for schools. These investments will make Tennessee a healthier state. And when we're healthier, it's good for Tennesseans and it's good for the bottom line. Fourth, and finally, when we have accomplished these and many other goals, what remains expected of us is that government be operated with integrity, effectiveness, and with as little cost as possible. Fundamentally, we believe that government exists to protect our liberties, not to grant favors or to build kingdoms or to needlessly interfere with the lives of citizens. To be sure, the voters did not send us here to create more government. No, they sent us here to protect their freedoms and to protect their hard-earned money. I have long believed that Tennessee's most precious natural resource is our people. And many of our people can be found at nonprofits all across this state who are doing the work with excellence that government cannot and should not do. So to help protect taxpayer dollars and to engage some of our most underutilized citizens, one announcement that I'm particularly excited to make is the Governor's Office of Faith-Based and Community Initiatives. This office will leverage the nonprofit community and help us unleash the potential of all Tennesseans to get involved not only to make lives better for their fellow citizens, but to reduce the responsibility and ultimately the size of government. I'd like to close with two short stories. This last month, we've seen record rainfall all across our state. Many areas have flooded and still are. Others have dealt with mudslides and water treatment plants have failed, and some of our neighbors have lost their loved ones. And our hearts are with those hurting families and with all the others who are still cleaning up, even tonight. And we're grateful to the first responders and state employees and everyday citizens who went out there during the storms and supported that cleanup. A few weeks ago, amid some scary moments, one state employee jumped in to help. When the flooding started in Dickson County, Lieutenant Travis Plotzer of the Tennessee Highway Patrol was at a flooded roadway on Highway 48. He went into chest-deep water to help rescue motorists stranded on top of their vehicles. He didn't hesitate to be the first one to help. He showed what it really means to be a public servant. He showed what it really means to be a leader. Please join me in recognizing Lieutenant Travis Plotzer from Dickson County. Thank you. Last month, for the first time in 35 years, I missed our annual all-employee gathering because for 35 years prior to becoming a governor, I worked in a family-owned business that I led for 20 years. I missed that gathering last year for the first time, last month for the first time, and it was bittersweet. But on that very same day, Maria and I had the privilege to host at our new home the Governor's Excellence in Service Award winners from each of Tennessee's 23 departments. We went around the room and listened to each one introduce themselves and explain their jobs. But what struck me most was not what they did, but the passion with which they did it. Those dedicated individuals and others like them that I've met since remind me that government itself is not a solution to our problems. We, the people, must solve our own problems. And while our state government's far from perfect, one thing I have learned during my first 2 months in office is that Tennessee has the most committed, hardworking group of state employees in the country, and I am proud to be serving alongside them. As my daughter Jessica and I neared the end of our climb on the Grand Teton, we came to a place that's famous for its very narrow ledge. And to make it worse, there's a section in that part of the ledge that has 1,000-foot exposure, which is evidently climber speak for 1,000-foot fall if you take a wrong step. And the point is, the only way to get across it was to set your face forward against the mountain and step sideways across the gap, and whatever you do, don't look down. As a state, we find ourselves in a very strong position with a very nice view. We can choose to stay right here and enjoy it, or we can choose to step across the ledge and move to higher, better ground. But if we decide to go to higher ground and to go farther, we must resolve to not look back and to not look down. If we lead Tennessee well, Tennessee may well lead the nation. And my prayer is that we will all work together to do just that. May God bless you, and may God bless the great state of Tennessee. Thank you.